All right, let's get right into it. We're talking about a story that kicks off with one of the most bizarre coastlines you've ever seen, blows up into a 70-year feud over fish, and ends up completely changing the rulebook for how we draw borders on the ocean. Seriously, this is a legal drama that literally redrew the map of the world.
So here's the central puzzle. Look at this. How on earth do you draw a border here? Norway's coast, it isn't some simple, clean line between land and sea. It's this beautiful, chaotic mess of fjords, bays, and literally thousands of islands. So where does the country actually end and the open ocean begin? It seems like a simple question, right? But this question is the spark that's about to light a huge international fire. To even start to understand this, you need a new word. It's a Norwegian one, skjaergaard. That's roughly skjaergaard. It means rock rampart. And you know what? That's the perfect description. This isn't just a handful of islands. It's like a continuous, rocky fence that stretches for over 1,000 kilometers, forming this crazy, complex barrier between the mainland and the sea. You gotta remember that word, because this skjaergaard, it's basically the main character in our story.
So yeah, we're starting with this puzzle of a coastline. This incredibly unique geography, the skjaergaard, it wasn't just some problem for map makers. The waters it protected were some of the richest fishing grounds on the planet. And, as you know, wherever you find valuable resources, conflict is usually not too far behind.
And that conflict quickly exploded into a massive fishing feud. This was never, ever just about lines on a map. This was about people's livelihoods. As fishing tech got more and more advanced, the question of who actually had the right to fish in these waters, well, it became explosive.
The history here is pretty wild. For about 300 years, things were pretty chill. British fishermen kind of agreed to stay away. But then 1906 hits. Everything changes. They come back, but this time with these powerful new steam trawlers that are just scooping up fish, and local Norwegians are freaking out. So in 1935, Norway draws its line in the sand, or I guess in the water, with a royal decree. The UK said no way. Negotiations went nowhere, trawlers got arrested, and boom! By 1949, they're taking this fight to the highest court in the world.
Okay, so the heart of the whole problem was how Norway was drawing its border. Think about it like a fence. Normally, a fence follows the curves of your property, right? Well, the UK basically accused Norway of building these giant, straight fences from the tip of one island to the next, sometimes miles out at sea, and then claiming all the water behind that fence as their own private territory. The big question was, is that even legal? And that leads us to the clash at the court. And this wasn't just, the UK versus Norway. It was a battle between two totally different ideas of how international law should even work. Should there be one universal, one-size-fits-all rule for everybody? Or should the rules be able to adapt to unique situations on the ground? The arguments on both sides were crystal clear. The UK was all about universal rules. They were saying, hey, there's a standard way to do this. You follow the curves of the coast, and you can't just close off big bays with a line longer than 10 miles. But Norway fired right back, saying, are you kidding? Our coast is completely unique. A universal rule is nonsense here. Our method follows the general direction of the coast. We've always been against your so-called 10-mile rule, and hey, we've been doing this for decades and nobody complained before.
So it really all boiled down to this one question. Does a universal, one-size-fits-all rule beat a local custom that was born out of a totally unique geography? Who was right?
The entire world was watching this case. The International Court of Justice was getting ready to hand down a verdict that wouldn't just settle a fishing fight. It was about to create a huge new principle in international law. And then, the verdicts came in. On December 18, 1951, by a vote of 10-2, the court sided with Norway. They declared that Norway's way of drawing straight lines was not against international law. I mean, this was a massive, stunning victory for Norway. But the really important question was, why? What on earth was the court's logic?
The court's reasoning was actually incredibly clear. First, they totally agreed that the skjaergaard was so unique it was basically just part of the mainland. Second, they pointed out that Norway had been doing this consistently since way back in the 1800s. Third, and this is the real kicker, they noted the general toleration from other countries. The UK, a huge maritime power, knew about this system for more than 60 years and never really protested it. And finally, the court just torpedoed the UK's main argument, saying that this 10-mile rule they kept talking about had never actually become a universal law.
And just like that, the idea of straight baselines was officially cemented in international law. The court basically said, look, for coastlines as messy and complex as Norway's, yeah, you can connect the dots. You can draw straight lines along the outer edges of your islands to create a clear, workable border.
This whole case is a masterclass in this really cool concept called customary international law. Think of it like the unwritten rules of the road for nations. These rules don't come from some fancy treaty, they just emerge from what countries actually do, over and over again for a long time because they believe they're legally supposed to. It's basically law that's formed by habit and acceptance.
But this case also gave us something else. And honestly, this is the big one. It's called the persistent objector rule. What it established is that even though this customary law is powerful, it's not absolute. The rule says that if a country consistently and clearly objects to a new custom while it is still being formed, then that new rule, even when it becomes law for everyone else, won't apply to them.
The process is pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. First, you have to object early on while the rule is just emerging. You can't wait until it's already established law. Second, you have to be consistent. You can't object one day and then go along with it the next. And the result? You can legally opt out of a rule that binds pretty much everyone else. And Norway was the perfect example. They've been objecting to that 10-mile rule since the 1870s.
So what's the lasting impact of this 70-year-old fishing fight? Well, turns out it's enormous. This wasn't just a win for Norway. This was a decision that would be literally written into the law for the entire planet.
You can see its legacy written right here, plain as day, in Article 7 of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is basically the constitution for all our oceans. The language is a direct echo of the court's decision. The principle that Norway fought so hard for, the right to draw straight baselines, is now the global standard for any country with a coastline like theirs. So in the end, a little dispute over fish in the North Sea gave us something so much bigger. It confirmed that international law has to be flexible enough to deal with reality on the ground. And it gave every single nation a powerful tool, the persistent objector rule, a clear legal way to stand up against a rising global tide and say, nope, not for us.
And that leaves us with this one last really fascinating question. The case of the Jagged Coastline showed us how a country can defy a global rule. But it also makes you wonder, in a world that is more connected than ever, when is it right for one nation's unique history and geography to stand against a rule that's meant for everyone else? It's a tension that's still right at the very heart of international law today.